Let me bring in my guests. We're joined with Andrii Telizhenko. There we are. Andrii Telizhenko, he is a good friend of the show, a Ukrainian whistleblower, formerly diplomat. Andrii, welcome to the show, man. I haven't seen you in a while. How you doing? You doing all right?
Good morning, Jamal. Good to see you. Yeah, didn't see each other for some time, so good to be back.
I have a question for you. So, and let me write this down just so I remember. Um, oh, Jesus, dropped out of my mind. Aristovich. Okay. So, two things. Recently, a Ukrainian diplomat was murdered in Spain. And, well, he wasn't a diplomat, a political figure, I should say. And you have various elements of the government, various elements of the Ukrainian, let's say, architecture that thought it was a great thing and was calling for the murder of other people who were opposition figures against this basically Banderite government that's in Ukraine currently. They murdered the guy in the middle of a European country, and the Europeans said Russia probably had something to do with it, which is astonishing, right? You have these neo Nazis who are running a Ukrainian regime at this point, blown off elections, blown off opposition media, blown off opposition political figures, put opposition political figures in jail, murdered opposition political figures, and many had to flee the country, like yourself, in order to preserve their life. And when a European country sees somebody get murdered on the street, that's a political opposition figure in Ukraine, their first thought is clearly the Russians had something to do with this. Give me your take on this, because you have many fascists in Ukraine that thinks this is great and that
hmm
are advocating for more of these killings for people who are outside of the country. Aristovich being one. And I want to get to Aristovich in a moment, but give me your take just on that part first.
First of all, I knew Andrii Portnov, the guy who got killed. We were friends for some time before. We didn't speak for each other with each other for the last couple of years. I spoke to him last year, I believe, over the phone. But we were friends before this, and I can tell you that he was murdered, from what I understand, because he was collaborating with the West onto lifting his sanctions and working with U.S. intel groups on lifting his sanctions. So
Mhm.
that's what the deal was about, from my information. And I spoke about this on RT right away after he got shot, an hour after he got shot. And
Wait,
he
real
was
quick. I just want to nail that down. They murdered him because he was working on trying to remove sanctions.
he was working to remove his sanctions, and he was collaborating with the Western intelligence against Zelensky. He was ready to give
Whoa.
compromise on Zelensky to the United States, and he was close to Zelensky the last couple of years. He was coordinating. He had his people in the government. He has people within the president's administration who he helped appoint. He had people in the cabinet ministers who he helped appoint. He basically, Andriy Portnov coordinated all the judicial sector in Ukraine, so within the Zelensky regime. So this is his role was he knew what was happening in the insides. He knew all the coordinations, and he really wanted his sanctions off, because I knew him and I worked with him when he was trying to lift his Canadian sanctions off and other sanctions, and he met with different G7 ambassadors before, and he was ready. He provided other information against Poroshenko, against those kind of people before, years before. But today, Zelensky regime doesn't basically doesn't let you do that, because anyway, if you want to go against the Zelensky regime, you're gonna get shot and killed right in downtown any European state. So this is the reality. This is my take on this. This is from my
Yeah.
understanding, knowing the situation a bit from the inside, what happened, and knowing Andrei Portnov personally. So unfortunately, that is the case. Again, it's not Russia. He was against Russia. He hated Russia. He actually criticized Russia, criticized me for going on RT, for going on Russian TV channels, talking or basically promoting peace with Russia. And that's our last conversation was over the phone. We actually had a bit of dispute about all that situation like a year ago, and that's what it was all about. Unfortunately, the guy had 5 kids, One of them, the last child, was born last year. That's what I congratulated Colin on that issue, and so that's a tragedy for the family, and
Yeah.
God rest his soul. But overall, that is the reality that he was not pro-Russian. He was very pro-Western, like wanted to be pro-Western, and worked with Western intel groups and intelligence to lift the sanctions and do whatever can to get the sanctions off, so he can, because he had some finances that he wanted to go back and forth, and he wanted that to not to restrain him.
So just so I'm clear, the sanctions were on him. And the
Yes,
sanctions were coming from what? The United States, or the sanctions were
yes,
coming from
yes.
Ukraine?
United
Okay.
States, United
So the
States.
sanctions were preventing him from going back to Ukraine.
No, the sanctions are preventing him from easily transferring money in between his businesses. The guy
I see.
is a multimillionaire. Like for him,
I see.
it was a big deal. It's not just like for a person like me who needs to get a job and etc. The guy had money, just couldn't transfer that too much. He had too much problems going around and paying too much taxes or in the side tips to get those money transferred. So he needed those sanctions off, the U.S. sanctions, and that is the case. He was working to get them lifted, and he was ready to sell out Zelensky. That's why he got shot.
So when you say sell out Zelensky, what does that mean? I mean, the
Give a
U.S.
compromise
intel,
against him. Give a compromise against Zelensky to the U.S. authorities.
but the U.S. doesn't know these stories.
I
I
think
mean,
they.
and the reason why I'm asking this, U.S. intel has been in Ukraine for decades.
I'm
And
calling.
so,
There's different groups within the United States Intel, right? It's not just the whole Intel, but there's also. I've been talking before with some FBI agents years ago who were actually who were workable with. They understood the situation. They did. They were not let to do their job by their superiors who are politicized by the Biden and Obama regime. So there are people who want to do their job. The same thing with Portnov and other people. There are, and there was information that from Ukraine, the people wanted to give out information to Washington on the Zelensky and how the money laundered the U.S. taxpayers' dollars, where the arm deals went, everything, all that kind of stuff that was interesting to the United States. And Andrii Portnov was the guy who knew a lot, and he had all that compromised information on his side that he wanted to use. And somebody found out, somebody leaked it, somebody like got it out there, and that's what I believe. I don't know if it's true. Maybe I'm wrong in the situation. Maybe there's something more to it. Like as I said, I only spoke to him last year, but this is the reality that was happening, from what I understood.
when you spoke to him last year, did this come up? Like, not about, clearly not about him being threatened, but about him working with Western intel and that he was going to give this information to Zelensky. Because, like
I knew
you
that he
said you
was
had
working with
sources.
West. I knew that he was working with Western Intel because I connected him once before I got sanctioned, before I was
I see.
still working the other side with that intel and with those people. So I know that he was working with them because I was the one who actually introduced him to some of the people he was working with, and plus he was working with other people, which I also knew from different sources.
Now, from, wow. So, what did he have? Files, documentation?
On
Basically, he had,
Zelensky, Yermak,
yeah.
all that crowd, or they're misusing their government and misusing U.S. taxpayers' money, weapons, etc., etc., etc. So,
And he was going to hand it all over. Was the Trump administration willing to use that information?
from what I
Because
understand, yes, there was interest in the RICO case in the United States. We spoke about this some time ago on your show, couple of shows back. There was interest in opening a RICO case against the Zelensky regime involving misuse of U.S. taxpayers' dollars after Trump became president. So that was the interest, and I think one of those people was like Portnov. I think there's more. There's not just Portnov, but
yeah.
Portnov was the guy who was very close to Zelensky, and that's why he took the hit from the Zelensky regime and get
Oh, that
shot
is
because
fascinating. Oh, that is fascinating. Wow. Because that's not the way they're talking about it. They're talking about it like, meaning what you just said is crucial information as to why he would be murdered. What Europe is saying, when they're saying anything at all, is, well, we think that this guy, because he was working with the Russians, that he got whacked,
he was
which
never
puts
working
a
with the Russians.
weird
Like
spin on it.
he was working with the Russians years ago. Years. I was also working with the Obama people years
Yeah.
ago, but I'm not their like or with the Democrats or with the neocons, whatever, like before 2004, 15, it doesn't make me with their guy.
Exactly.
I was then I changed my view dramatically and went on the other side. The same thing with Portnoy. He
Well,
actually
that's my
changed
point.
his view, and he worked with Zelensky, and everybody knew that he worked with Zelensky. Everybody who knew Portnoy and anybody who worked in the government sector or intel within Europe knows that this guy was working with Zelensky very closely. He was meeting with him
Wow.
closely, and he was coordinating all the judicial sector in Ukraine. So they knew what he was doing and what he was about. It's not like just came out of the sky. This guy was actually a prominent figure in the Ukrainian political sphere. He was not an official position, but he coordinated everything in the background. He was like a puppeteer within the court system and judicial system and different other sides in the law enforcement sector in Ukraine. So like
Yeah.
this guy was prominent. It's not like just some regular figure who was running around and
It's
bragging about
unfortunate
stuff.
because they just trashed his. It puts you in the mind of like in the United States. Sometimes you have a situation where, let's say, a kid get killed by the cops, like the kid gets murdered, and they would say, "Yeah, the cops killed him, but he smoked marijuana." And it's like, okay, well, what does the marijuana have to do with the fact that you murdered the guy? It's like it's a way of damaging the person's reputation and try to make them look bad, as if it was justifiable what happened to him. That's the way they treated him in the media. They were like, well, he's a shady business guy. He's this and that. Missing the basic fact of what you just said. This guy was an opposition political figure in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government had him murdered. And in many respects, as you point out, had him murdered because he had information on Zelensky that they effectively needed to silence him before the information got out. So they would go so far as to take a brazen act of terrorism on European soil. And the European response to this is to pretend as if this is not a big deal, or that he somehow had it coming. It's just amazing.
That's
It's just,
that's why if it was the other way around, it would have been a bigger deal in the European press, or
yes,
the outcome of the investigation would have been known that this is the where it all came from. Because it's not being known today, it gives me understanding that it was the involvement of Kiev in this situation where everything is quiet now. So like we were friends before. We had our disputes. We didn't talk for a couple of years. We had different political opinions on the situation. He actually hated Russia the last years.
yeah,
He had his family house blown up by the Russian military or something happened. I don't know, something personal happened. And he was working closely with Zelensky. That's what I know, and that's it. So the problem is, the reality is, if they would say the truth in the press, at least, I would have believed maybe I would be wrong. But even
yeah,
they're saying the opposite thing of what I'm saying, knowing some of the situations on the inside, I didn't know everything, but right, as I spoke a year ago to him. But at least I would have known that I was wrong if they would tell the truth. But here, now they're not saying the truth; they're saying the opposite of what the truth is. And actually reached out to a couple of Western media, like the big media agencies, and spoke to them off record, and they said we are working on the story in a different way. So that's what I got in my answer. So I understood that
wow,
I
that
was
is
ready to tell
amazing.
them the truth.
That is amazing. I'm not, by the way, not shocked at all. We're looking at the story in a different light. Yeah, I bet you
Yeah,
are. I bet you are. Oh man, that is amazing. Because I was going to ask you if any of the media organizations reached out to you, but as you pointed out, you reached out to them, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not
like
interested."
we shoot back and forth. They reached out to them, then they called me back, and they said they basically I gave them some of the insights what I told you here, and I said, "Oh, we're going to call you back." They called me back. Said, "We're looking at this on different light. Our people on the ground are different. There's different people working on this. We're not going to meet."
Wow, just amazing, just amazing. I'm curious on something else. Arestovich once made this statement, this speech, where he pointed out, he said, "Well, in order for us to get NATO membership, we are going to have to go through the Russians to do it." Meaning he knew in advance that this was going to lead to war. He accepted it was going to lead to war and was okay with it leading to war in this kind of test of strength in order to be part of NATO. When you were working with the Ukrainian government, did they know that? Like, was that something that was widely understood, or was that something that was only understood by a few people who were in those government, was in the government?
No, it was understood. That's why I came out of the government. I didn't want my country to be getting into this chaos of bloodshed, and that's why I came out against the Biden crime family because they were using Ukraine for their crimes, and I knew they're going to use Ukraine for something bigger. This will lead them off the hook. They're going to use Ukraine for something bigger. That's why I came out with the facts against Biden, because I knew that he was going to lure Ukraine into this shitstorm. Sorry for my language, but
Yeah.
that's
Oh, you're fine. It's a shitstorm. Yeah.
and everybody since after the coup knew that this is going to be a war. I actually were talking with different G7 ambassadors and embassy officials since 2014-15 to send in sleeper agents, because we were coordinating law enforcement, and I was working within the prosecutor's office. Plus, I was working with the foreigners a lot, talking off record to them, doing different meetings. So there were talks about in 2014-15 with this Five Eyes group of the five intel agencies from around the globe to use Ukraine to send sleeper agents within Russia for them to then do terrorist attacks and to get more agents from within Russian territory to use against Russia itself. So this was talking 2014-15, right? Like long before this big war with or this conflict with Russia started. So
Yeah.
they were preparing for this war. And I was like I said, there were different factors when I found out about what was happening in my country, but I didn't want my country going that far.
Yeah.
The only way out was for me to get out and start speaking the truth from the other side, which I did. Gradually, I went from smaller steps, being afraid, then saying I should speak out more and more, and that today where I am, I'm speaking with my lungs open, freely what I want. But it all started from small steps, being afraid for my life, because I knew that they're
Yeah.
going to go after me if I do go right away. So this was all being pre-planned. Aristovich knew about this also, like being after the government. But under even Poroshenko, this was all being coordinated and pre-planned. They wanted this war. They believed that Ukraine could have won this war. The West told that the Russian army has no military, that their nuclear missiles, aren't capable. They were feeding this information to the Ukrainian government and lying to us all the time, and basically getting all these ideas of use sleeper agents from Ukraine, because Ukrainians, even with Belarusians, are Russian. It's much closer to the Russian language. So basically, we have no accent with the Russians.
Right.
We were one country, right, for more than 350 years.
Yeah.
Are together, and before that, we were also one country for
I'm sorry,
because
Russia. Yeah.
we started from one source, from Kiev, and then all spread to the side of the country. So that they were using Ukraine long before the war and conflict started to get this basically escalation and to get what we see today. So this is Aristotle's words are true. He knew about it also. Problem is, why didn't he do anything sooner than that? He started going into opposition after they understood that they could not destroy Russia from within. Basically, after 3 months, that was the time frame for them to understand if Russia will shake apart, what the people will rise and take over the government and take over Putin and basically have a revolution there and dismantle it into 50 pieces or 3 pieces, whatever, to take over its resources. It didn't happen, so then Aristotle basically understood and he fled, understanding that they lost and he needs to do something to save himself. So that's why he's acting opposition today, even
Yeah.
though
It's actually he realized he screwed up and that it didn't turn out the way that he was told it was going to turn out. And so he bailed. He got out of Dodge.
yes, if he had sold, he would have bailed sooner, but he didn't, or some conscience.
This is a catastrophe. And I feel like the fact that my government pushes this, oh, I feel horrible about that. Give me your read on Zelensky for a moment. Like, let me give you my read first, and I want to give me your take on it. I get the sense that when Zelensky, well, two things. First, when Zelensky first got elected, and he got elected on a peace ticket, this is part of the reason I find this to be such a catastrophe. The majority of the country wanted peaceful existence. They didn't want a war. That's why they elected him. Do you think when he first got elected, he was being straight that that's what he wanted? Or do you think he was an actor from the very beginning?
He, I knew, as I said, we spoke about this, and I knew him before
Yeah.
he became president. Actually, Portnoy was the one who actually convinced me to support Zelensky at one point. in 2019 that he will be a game changer. He'll bring peace. He'll go to Donbass and speak to the people of Donbass 2 weeks after he gets elected. That they will try to unite Ukraine back together. He'll implement the Minsk Accords. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So that was the deal, even from the inside. People like Portnoy and other people who I worked with, they knew Zelensky, and basically that's what the deal was about. That's how I actually got sold on him because I didn't believe that an actor could be president. I was like, what the hell is this? This is like I cannot like a person who works in politics and government. I cannot support a guy who was an actor. Like for me, it was until March of 2019, I did not support him. And like I
Yeah.
had my big doubts about him. And then on Lee Portnov, we spoke, and he said, "Oh, you should support this guy. He's our guy. He's gonna bring peace." Blah blah blah. So I went into on that, and actually Zelensky did want peace. And then in July, I believe so, 2019, he went to London and then he switched sides. Prince Chip took him to London because Kolomoisky, the owner of Zelensky at that time, had financial problems and sanction problems with the United States and criminal case against him within the FBI. So the other oligarch, the Soros right hand man, Prince Chip, took Zelensky to London and basically introduced him to MI6. And that's when Zelensky sold out, and then that's when Ukraine was preparing for full scale war because
So just to be
Poroshenko,
no, please. I'm sorry. Please.
yeah, because Poroshenko at one time he backed out. He was afraid to go to war with Russia, so that's why he got changed, and and that's why the elites want to change the government for a person like Zelensky, who maybe go the other track, but then Zelensky cleaned house and went against his owners like Kolomoisky and other oligarchs, and went under the Brits in the West and South to fight this war to have more power than the oligarchs who control him. So that's what his character is. That's who he is. He doesn't care about people, doesn't care about anything else. He just cares about himself. And that's why he did it. He didn't do it for Ukraine to be free and join NATO or whatever what he's talking about in public. He did it to make money. The West promised him, the Brits and the CIA promised him that he will be a billionaire, that he will make much, much, much more money than even the Russians can pay him. So this is the reality. You're gonna be hero number one. You're gonna be God in democracy. That's what we're gonna do for you, and we're gonna protect you until the end. So and that's when he basically became a British citizen. His wife is a British citizen. Yermak is a British citizen, and his whole security detail is being coordinated by the British intelligence. Like his detail is Ukrainians, but they're coordinated by the British intelligence. Their security, his protection, and his family is also. So this is the reality. That's when he switched, and that's when Ukraine was going on to full scale war mode and not backing out.
Just so I'm clear, I want to make sure I heard this right. So when he first ran, he really did want peace, and he's
Yeah,
changed.
yes, he actually promised people who were supporting him and financing him and coordinating him that he will bring peace to Ukraine. Not
And
only to the
just
people, public, like on TV,
even
but also
behind the scenes, he was making that
behind the
promise.
scenes. Yes, because there were already deals made that he's going to go to Donetsk 2 weeks after he gets elected and speak to the people in Donbass that there are trying to unite Ukraine back. That's that the idea was for him to do such kind of projects, but then he backed out. The Americans were trying to find a way to get to him. I know that's also from fact because I was in contact. I had people even from the Obama administration who thought public were destroying my name on CNN, etc., calling me and saying, "How do we get to Zelensky? We need contact with him," because they didn't have direct reach out to him. And so that's basically they found him the way to him, and he was brought to the British intelligence, and he sold out to the British intelligence to fight this war. That's the only way for his only agenda was to start and get Russia involved in this conflict, and that's it. Russia had no other choice to get involved because their national security interests were on the brink of line because then things would have got much much worse if Ukraine had any other missiles involved or anything else on their soil from outside, not their own, from outside of Ukraine, being brought on Ukrainian soil. So basically, that was a danger for the Russian Federation. any
Andrii, that is
nuclear
deeply
launch
frustrating to
missiles
hear.
from Ukraine to Russia 3 minutes away. That's not the time frame for Moscow to be handling. It's the same with the Cuban Missile Crisis. But everybody in the Cuban Missile Crisis understood that there's national security threats on both sides, and that's why there were two minds prevailed. Kennedy backed out of Turkey with the Saturn program, and then
Right.
the Soviets backed out of Cuba. So this was all worked out. Here we have a total disaster of political figures running the world. I'm talking about Europeans and Ukraine and all the other globalists. Like I still have hope for Trump, and I still hope
Andrii,
that he has things on the table, and I hope for Putin also.
this is deeply frustrating because what that means is even if a person gets elected on a peace ticket, it doesn't mean that they're going to go through with it. Meaning, even if they're true believers, that they can be got. Putin said one day, he says, it doesn't really matter what the American president wants. He said, regardless of what they say, a man is going to come in with a black suit, open a suitcase, and explain this is how the world works. And this is what we need you to do. And that sounds very similar to what you're telling me about Zelensky. Regardless of what he wanted politically in the very beginning, when he took on this role of, okay, I'm going to be a peace candidate, he was flipped based on his own wants. And in those money, maybe your life, maybe, whatever they use in order to flip him, that he flipped, that he initially was a true believer. And somewhere along the way, he became this figure that we see now. I want to get to something else with Zelensky. Give me a read on this. Do you think that part of the reason he is so, they described him in Western media as messianic, that it's almost like a religious thing for him, like he's in religious reverie, playing this role of, I'm always in these fatigues, I'm always in this war mode, that type of person that he's playing on TV. Do you think part of that is because he feels that he was lied to, that they told him, you're going to beat the Russians, we're going to go after them economically, you're going to go after them militarily, you're going to get all of this money, you're going to be safe, Ukraine is going to win, you're going to join NATO, you blah, 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 blah. Meaning they told him all of this stuff. And 600,000 dead Ukrainians later, a country that has been just ripped up, where they're losing 20, 30% of their territory, he, on some level, he feels like he's been led down a path, that he's effectively been lied to, which is part of the reason why he's been so adamant, give me money, give me weapons. Europe must give me billions of dollars. The United States can't just leave me in this situation. Because for all intents and purposes, they promise him things that they're not now delivering.
Yeah, first of all, he's a bully for himself. He's basically a very characteristic, like the one who plays the show as a comedian, a nice guy. It's all a lie. Personally, he is very aggressive and bully style, like street
It
style guy.
shows. Yeah, it
He
shows.
like I met him after he got elected. We had lunch, and he was actually very, I'm the president, I'm this, and I'm the powerful guy. Like he was actually very tough, even though small guy, former drug addict at that time that he came back to the drugs. So like that kind of stuff, you can see from him is very trying to be more confident than he is. Uh, that's one thing, and you're right on this. And I know because we were also told the same thing that he was being told that you were telling here right now, for example, that you're going to win the Russians. The Russians are nothing. Ukraine can beat them. We were told the same thing in the
Mhm.
government. We had former deputy head of Pentagon come to Ukraine in 14, and U.S. senators and other officials and CIA officials come to Ukraine and say, "You're going to beat the Russians. They're not going to do anything. You have to go forward. You have to." They were giving us classified information about Putin, which was not making any sense at all, and which was the opposite of what was the reality
Yeah.
on Putin. Because actually, I started watching Putin's interviews and how he acts, what his constant political position was from 1991. He actually didn't change his political position at all. He was constant. Like it shows some something within a person what he actually is compared to Zelensky, Ukraine,
Right.
Poroshenko,
Yeah.
always changing their mind. They don't know what they're doing because they do not know what they're doing. Zelensky got lured into it much easier because he didn't understand politics at all. He didn't understand the reality at all. He said that this is just going to be a walk in the park, and he's going to become a billionaire. He's going to trash Russia, even though he made millions of dollars in Russia before, and he didn't care about that. And so
You're saying he's going to be
that's
he was easily manipulated. That's your point.
yeah,
He was
because he
not
didn't
a common
understand politics.
yeah.
We understood politics a bit, and even then we were manipulated because it was brought us to us not just by some like Mr. John from America who came in. I'm going to bring you a file on Putin or Russia or whatever. No, it was brought on by U.S. government officials, high-ranking U.S. government officials, classified information on Russia, which was a lie. And we actually also were buying into it. And then at the same time, we were understanding that something's wrong here, and we didn't move in full scale as they were telling us to do. So this is the reality. The West lies. The West used Ukraine. The problem is Ukraine wanted to be used at the same time. Ukraine elites wanted to sell out to the West at the same time. I said, I was there. They were trying to sell out to Americans, getting
Yeah.
U.S. passports, etc., etc. Like the head of the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Umerov, the guy who was running the so-called peace talks in Istanbul, he is a U.S. citizen. His wife lives in Miami in a $1 million villa. There you go. Like there's just a lot of other people who are foreign citizens and different. Like we have British citizens, we have French citizens, German citizens, Klitschko, U.S. citizens, everything. The president of Ukraine is a British citizen. He has a British passport. His father and mother lives in Israel. They got Israeli passport. So this is like we have a whole. Nobody's Ukrainian. Only the people who are Ukrainians are getting killed
They're
right now,
gone.
being thrown like dogs to the front lines because they're poor, they have the possibility to fight for themselves, and they are under propaganda believing that they can win Russia. But everybody else, the elites, there's nobody else to trust there. They sold out not just to America or to the British, they sold out to the globalists and neocons, the people who don't even represent those countries, the British and Americans. They represent themselves only, but they're under government support. That's why they have so much power. So this is the reality.
Andrii, this has been a fantastic interview. No, honestly, there are about 720 people here watching this interview. It is amazing to me because when Zelensky is like, "Give me weapons, give me weapons, give me weapons. You must give me this. You must give me money. You must give me this." And you think to yourself, if they promised him certain things, that would explain why he acts this way. Like his behavior makes sense in the context of believing what he has been told. People in suits saying, "You're going to be able to do this. You're going to be a billionaire. You're going to take over, you're going to be at NATO. You're going to be part of the EU. You're going to beat the Russians. And they're promising him all of these things. And he's thinking, I'm talking to people in power. They know they can ensure that these things happen. And then
He's
it all
talking to
falls apart.
liars, who
Yeah,
don't care about anybody.
but he doesn't know that. And it all falls apart. And he's stuck with a broken country with hundreds of thousands of lives on his conscience.
But
That's assuming
if he wanted to get out, he could have risked his life for something. But he could have came out.
but
He
Andrii,
could
there's the
look.
rub.
I know. But I spoke to his people 2 years ago before the
Uh,
China peace plan, etc. And I told them this clown can be a blood clown, or he can be at least a clown that saved the country, didn't let it to more bloodshed.
yeah,
Get out of this, go on the Chinese plan, agree on it. It's not Russian, it's Chinese. Agree upon this, have the Chinese help you work this way out with the Russians, with the West, and move forward, save the country. I got this to people who were close to Zelensky. They actually wanted to meet with me outside of Ukraine, where I'm at. We made a disclosed location, etc. But they
yeah.
didn't go for it. They didn't. He has so much other people who can tell him that also, and he understands that he's done. He could have just come out and say, "We're going to sign this peace deal with the Russians," and that's it.
But
He
is he
could have
worried about
saved
his life?
millions of people.
Is that
Yeah,
what it
but
is?
everybody's worried. I'm worried about my life too. But I'm coming out and saying things and trying to do things. I'm worried about my life. But I'm
Yeah.
trying to do things for my country because I believe that maybe my even small interview here and there can get somebody to understand what is happening and save somebody's life. He can do it physically. He can just sign the agreements, peace deals, and get out of Ukraine, get a deal, go somewhere, maybe to China, and shut up. And that's it. Just save the country and leave. No, he's
Yeah.
there. He's still sticking to his seat. He got lied to. He understands that he got lied to, but he's still sticking to his seat, believing and believing that they're still lying to him that they can topple Russia. That is the problem here.
So
I'm
you
not.
think he really believes that he still can win
Yeah,
this?
yeah. He does. That's why he actually, at one point, he stopped believing it. It was right after Trump became president, and then the Europeans lured in very aggressively onto him and onto Trump, saying he needs to continue this war. And Zelensky actually believed in again in their eyes that they can win again. They need to topple Russia. They need to Russia respond aggressively. That's why they're making all these provocations and Russian soil, terrorist attacks, so they can have Russia respond aggressively, even though Russia can, because actually the nuclear arsenal was or nuclear potential was hit, and basically their national security, they can respond as easily as possible. The United States would have responded with the hellfire on any country would have done that, and they say it's the name of democracy. So Russia has the same possibility, but it doesn't, because President Putin actually has a cool head and understands that he wants peace, not war. If he wanted war, he could have destroyed Ukraine really fast and come in and that'd be it. No, but he wants to end this peacefully. So, but Zelensky still wants to push Russia and show a picture and get more money. That's why he's still doing it. So I'm not giving him a way out. Don't believe in that he's some young boy that he got fooled. He got fooled, but he believes in those lies. He wants to believe
Oh,
in those lies because any way other way around, he would have left and saved this and said, "The hell with you! I'll make a deal with Russia, China, anywhere else, India, for example, and leave."
no,
There's
you
other
have my full
chances he
agreement.
could do, but
You
he
have my full
doesn't.
agreement. Yeah,
So
you have my full agreement
don't get
on
him
this.
off the hook easily. He's a
No,
very
he gets no pass on this. Dude, it's like you've gotten hundreds of thousands of people killed. You had a philosophical responsibility to your country that you've failed at. I mean, you've been sending people on these death missions for propaganda purposes. Like it's disgusting. So no, I'm not trying to give him a pass. I'm trying to understand what's in his mind and like why his behavior seems so strange to me. And I'm trying to
look. He's
understand
a
what's going
drug
on.
addict. At the same time, you can understand.
Oh,
You cannot understand a drug addict's mind directly. If it was a regular, normal person, it would be one thing. But then you have people like who are in cocaine a lot and for years and years. You cannot understand what they want.
one last thing before I let you go. Klitschko and Zelensky. The Klitschko thing is very weird to me. So Klitschko was one of these people that Victoria Nuland, when she was on the phone with Jeffrey Pyatt, and she was like, F the EU, we're going to put people in these positions and everything else. Klitschko was one of those people. What's weird about it is that they overthrew the government of Ukraine. And so when Klitschko is like, this is not democracy, it wasn't democracy since they overthrew the government of Ukraine. It's just very weird that that's the angle that he's taken. But he has been very angry at Zelensky because Zelensky has been effectively destroying any notion of political opposition, even among the Banderites. What is going on with that? And this could be the last question.
Yeah, money,
Okay.
money flow. That's what. No, it goes as simple as that. There's no. They covered up with their political so-called opposition. Money flow. That is it. Kiev is a big money gamer in the situation. Klitschko controls all the prostitution, drug situation in the city, so he has a lot of control, and also the building and projects within the city that Zelensky's people want to come in.
Yeah.
They have to give payouts to Klitschko or to his people. There's a lot of criminal cases against each other, so that's why Zelensky doesn't want it. Plus, he's a prominent figure that can get the West's attention and has the West's attention to, if Zelensky go down, they can put in Klitschko because he is a German citizen. He has a lot of support from the Europeans. Yeah, Zelensky is a British, but
Yeah.
UK is not in the EU, and plus UK is not with the US that much. It's in the middle, so they have their own problems political. Klitschko was one time thought of as a president in 2012. I knew people who lobbied him in Washington. I was with Klitschko's team for some time during that when they were close with Timoshenko, and even during the coup, people thought that Klitschko would be the next president. And then at the
Interesting.
end of the coup, it all switched really fast. Poroshenko became the figure that was going to go run for president, and Klitschko backed out. So at the same time, it's not just their decisions. You have to understand, it's all decisions from outside. Newland, the Germans, the British, the Americans, they're all waging in on who's going to become the who in Ukraine. And with Zelensky, that's what they basically didn't believe that he could have won, and he did win because the people wanted peace, and that they bought him off after.
Wow.
All these other guys are bought in before. So they're all going and advising with their puppeteers outside of Ukraine. And the same thing here with Zelensky and Klitschko, just a money flow problem. Klitschko has a lot of support in Europe, and that's why Zelensky is afraid of him as an opponent that could come in and basically switch sides and destroy him at one point. The West will say, "We want Klitschko. It's easier for him to switch. He's the mayor. He's there. He's our guy also." Zelensky goes away. We're going to destroy him. So that's why Zelensky wants to destroy him before the West puts him into power.
I see. Andrii, this was a great interview. I've been illuminated, honestly. Like I've learned a lot in this interview. Thank you for this, man. You be safe. Andrii Telizhenko, he's a Ukrainian whistleblower, former diplomat. Be safe, man. You have a good one, okay?
Thank you. God bless them all. It was always a great pleasure talking to all the
Oh, man.
viewers and listeners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. That was a good interview. That was a very good